What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Today, we're doing episode 110. Today is July the 28th, and we're going to try to get you 2 episodes tonight. And joining me, as always, my incredible co-host, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Wing. What's up?
What is up? How are you doing? I know you have some coffee. I thought about making coffee, but I didn't have to fly this morning, so I'm not too tired. Got a nap in earlier, so I'm pretty hyped up for this podcast. Glad to be back after another short break. And who's ready to talk football? Because that is what we are here to do today. Training camps have opened across the NFL. All 32 teams have started their training camps as of, I guess, the start of this week. And so we're kind of going to be doing a little bit different this year as we have done in years past here on the podcast for our season previews. Basically going to go division by division, sort of what we wanted to do before the offseason started, but we didn't get around to because of so many other things happening. Schedule conflicts, stuff like that. We're going to do that now. We're going to recap each team's offseason, and then at the very end, right before the season, we'll do our actual predictions. But we're going to talk about everything else you need to know about each team in these division by division, probably one division per episode. So it'll be fun. We'll probably also talk college football here pretty soon. That starts in about a month from right now. So we'll be talking about that. And then all the other stuff we have going on. We're going to talk a little bit about the MLB trade deadline. We just came out of the All-Star break. We can talk a little bit about that if you want as well. So, yeah, it should be a good episode. We're going to try to get 2 in tonight. So let's do it.
Yeah. We're going to cover the AFC North, as you said. And let's just get right into it. I was thinking we start off from bottom to the top based on last year's standing. So that would mean we start with the Ravens. So
Ravens. You can start us off.
Yeah. I'm just going to start with a quick recap of what happened last year. It's been a while. Basically, the worst case scenario happened and some for the Ravens last year. They finished the season 8-9, and everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And, we saw it before the season started. We saw all their cornerbacks go down. They're like, oh, wow, okay, maybe they can recover from this. They have a lot of depth. They're a good team. But it just kept on coming in waves. Every single position group was equally hit until to the point where at the end of the season, you saw practice squatters out there. So not good. They finished the season on a 6-game losing streak, which, I mean, if you told me that at the beginning of the year that the Ravens were going to finish the season on a 6-game losing streak and finish the season below 500, I would have told you you're crazy. But that's what happened. And now, as they sit here today, they made a lot of moves to get younger. I actually like a lot of what they did this offseason, and we're gonna cover all of it. So I'm gonna transition over to you. Just give your overall thoughts, just your first impressions of what do you think of the Ravens' game plan, and how do you think they executed?
Well, I'll start by just kind of going over what they did and what happened this offseason. I like to start with what you lost because then we can kind of go to what they added and see how it sort of matches up. Key losses this offseason for the Ravens. They lost 2 starters on the offensive line. Bradley Bozeman, their center, and Alejandro Villanueva, former Steeler, who retired. But they did, we'll get to this later, they did end up signing Morgan Moses to a deal. So they did replace the tackle, upgrade at the tackle position. But we'll get to that in a minute. I believe Justin Houston re-signed. I could be wrong on that, but they lost to Sean Elliott, who was a starter for them at safety. Some depth pieces: Devontae Freeman, L.J. Fort, Latavius Murray at the running back position, Jimmy Smith at cornerback. These are just some. They didn't lose anything too much, but they did lose 2 stars on the offensive line. A cornerback in Anthony Everett. They were very banged up last year. I believe they started the season like 8-3, if I'm not mistaken. Had a rough go down the stretch due to injuries. Obviously, the huge question we have to talk about right now with Baltimore is, when is this Lamar Jackson, extension going to get done? We just saw Kyler Murray get his money. So what is that going to look like? And is this going to be a looming cloud over the Baltimore Ravens team this upcoming season? I do think it'll get done by the end of training camp, but that's the biggest storyline. Obviously, what they added, I love the addition of Marcus Williams and what they did through the draft defensively. Adding a guy like Kyle Hamilton, they always draft well. Defensive tackle Travis Jones, who had high upside out of Connecticut. I think he'll come in and be kind of a versatile run stopper right away. I love what they did on the defensive side of the ball, bringing back a veteran like Justin Houston. And don't forget, on the offensive side, Morgan Moses, who was a good tackle, I believe, with Washington last season, to replace what they lost in Villanueva. He's an upgrade. And then also Linderbaum, who they got in the first round of the draft, along with Kyle Hamilton. I think he should fill in nicely on that offensive line. So, look, for the Ravens, it's just going to be about staying healthy, getting this Lamar Jackson extension done. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to mention that Marquise Brown trade that went down on draft night. He went he got traded to Arizona, so they did lose him as well. But I don't worry too much about it. I mean, you have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. You always have a good running game. This offense is predicated on a running game. You have an all-pro tight end, Mark Andrews, who, set new franchise records in catches and receiving yards last season. Led the league at his position, tight end. And I expect guys like Rashad Bateman at the wide receiver position, a guy who was hurt last year, to really step up and fill that void left by Marquise Brown. I know Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown were good friends, but I don't foresee any problems with them, guys stepping up and filling in that role. This is an offense, once again, predicated on the run game. They'll find production where they need it. It's just all about that secondary staying healthy and that offensive line staying healthy. That's what's really killed them in the past. I think they're going to be a good team. The AFC is really strong, and we're obviously going to talk about that a lot. But I don't know. It's a tough division. So, they won, 8 games last year, and they had all those injuries. I could see them winning 9 or 10 games this upcoming season. They do have not an easy schedule, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're just here to talk about the offseason. So I think they had a solid offseason. I love their draft. I think it was one of the best drafts in the league. They got guys who can play like right now and make an impact on this team. They got a lot younger. They didn't lose anyone too humongous. I think they got better on defense, and I think they got better on the offensive line too, with Linderbaum and Morgan Moses. And I love Marcus Williams, the safety addition, as well.
Right, exactly. For me, it's mostly just it's a youth movement in Baltimore right now. I mentioned that earlier, and I think this year a lot is going to fall on the shoulders of Rashad Bateman, their first-round pick from 2021, who had a injury-ridden rookie campaign, to say the least. He didn't have the production a lot of people were hoping for, but the talent is still there. The potential is still there 100%. And, hopefully with another offseason under his belt, a little bit more chemistry with Lamar Jackson, he can transition and perform like a number one wide receiver. Because if that doesn't happen, a lot will end up falling on that run game, which in the past has worked, but I feel like we saw more so last year than ever that the NFL is starting to catch up with some of the, you know, RPO and, read option type of offense. Linebackers are getting smarter. They've got years and years of studying it. It's not this new scheme on the block anymore. And as these defensive players, as smart as they are, learn more and more about it, they're going to be able to stop it better and better. So Baltimore needs to become more multi-dimensional. I can't really find a better way to say that, but they need to become more multi-dimensional and be able to lean on the passing game to win games and have a more balanced attack if they want to ascend.
Yeah, the passing game from the pocket for Lamar Jackson has always been a question. They do need to become a more balanced attack, but ultimately, I don't think the casual football fan understands just how bad it was last year with injuries. You're talking about a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who I really thought was going to be a breakout guy, not only in the fantasy aspect, but just in general last year. And he goes down in their preseason finale last year with the ACL tear, missed the entire season. A guy like Kevin Zeitler, the right guard, who was really good for them out of Wisconsin, the veteran. He was their top lineman, but ultimately got hurt at the end of last year. That wasn't great. Ronnie Stanley needs to stay healthy. I do like that tackle combo they have now with Morgan Moses, who they just signed, and Ronnie Stanley. If those guys stay healthy, act right away. I love their offensive line. I love their running game. And as long as guys like Devin Duvernay and Rashad Bateman step up in the passing game, I think they'll have a more balanced attack. I think the defense got younger. They have the veterans that you need, both in the back end with a guy like Marcus Williams. Marcus Peters will be back. Marlon Humphrey's still one of the best corners in the game, man-to-man. Patrick Queen is a guy who's been here a couple years. He needs to figure it out, but he's a good guy to have in the middle. They re-signed Calais Campbell, and Travis Jones is the guy I'm looking at early on the interior of the defensive line. Defense will be solid. Offense will be run predicated, but I do expect them to have more balance through the passing game because I think they upgraded at the offensive line position, especially at tackle. So as long as they can get this Lamar Jackson contract situation sorted out relatively soon, I think it'll be a good season for the Ravens. And remember, they were 8-9 last year, but they lost 2 games on missed 2-point conversion tries, one in Pittsburgh and one in Green Bay. And so that's 2 games right there that could have swung their season, even with all these injuries.
Right.
So I don't know exactly how they stack up with the rest of the division yet. I don't know how I'm going to line up my predictions, but the Ravens will definitely be there in the hunt for the playoffs this year if they stay healthy.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see how they go about this year's preseason. We saw a lot of injuries before the season started last year. So I wonder if maybe Harbaugh will, continue with his same approach, or if he kind of dials it back and has his, starters and key guys kind of hang back a little bit and have lower reps. It'll be interesting to see how they go about that. But I think that's it on the Ravens. They had overall, I'd say, had a really solid offseason. With the cards they were dealt and the disappointment they had last season, I think they did as good as they could have done.
Right.
And that's saying a lot. So let's move on here to the next team on the list, the third best team in the division, who finished with the same record as the Ravens, the Cleveland Browns, who have been in many headlines this offseason, as we know. They've had a very busy time Let's just say that. It all starts off, obviously, with the acquisition of Deshaun Watson and the rather big contract that they gave him. I believe it's the first ever fully guaranteed contract of that size, and just the biggest ever. Um, so crazy there. Obviously, for a guy who hasn't played in a year, we'll get up to all that stuff later. They traded Baker Mayfield for pennies on the dollar. Everybody knew they had to trade him, so his value went down a lot. Um, but let's just get into this. What did you think of their offseason? And just outside of the big move, the Deshaun Watson, what do you think is the big one that you think might be going under the radar right
Man, the Browns, they were busy this offseason. If you look at last year, sort of a disappointing year compared to expectations. They did have some injuries as well, but Baker Mayfield wasn't fully healthy at the end of the season. They had some injuries on the offensive line. Their right tackle, Jack Conklin, was out with a torn patellar tendon. Hopefully he comes back healthy. Obviously, you love their offensive line if they're healthy. I think the key for them this offseason, their big loss was, losing J.C. Treader, their Pro Bowl center. They did get two guys, Nick Harris and Ethan Posich, who I believe came over from Seattle. And they're going to have a battle at the starting center position during training camp, I believe, to figure out that position. And that is a very important position. But otherwise, you look at Joel Petonio, who's going into his 10th season at the left guard position. You look at Wyatt Teller, who's coming off a Pro Bowl season at the right guard position. I think the big storyline here for this Browns team is Jedrick Wills, the guys they drafted 2 years ago in the first round out of Alabama. He had an ankle injury last year that sort of slowed his growth as a player. I think that and the center position are two positions to watch at left tackle and center for this offensive line that's been top 5 in the league the past couple of years. But I think it'll be solid. Obviously, Deshaun Watson, we don't know what will happen with that yet. So until we get news on that, I'm sort of just going to let that pass by. Amari Cooper was obviously one of the more headline additions for this Browns team. I think he'll fit in well. They did end up resigning David Njoku after, he was rumored to be wanting out of Cleveland. David Bell's a guy that they drafted out of Purdue that needs to make an impact right away. And then, of course, they still have Donovan Peoples-Jones, a guy who can stretch the field. So I like that receiving core. Obviously, the running game is very good. Nick Chubb, he just keeps on churning out 1,000-yard seasons and Pro Bowls all over the place. So I don't worry about him as long as he's healthy. Offense will be good. They have Jacoby Brissett, a totally capable backup if needed for the first 6-8 weeks of the season, which I think they will need. But I think they can get through that with their running game. Now, the defense, I think, is a more interesting question. I'm looking personally at Jeremiah Owusu-Karamoah, who I think is going into his second year, third year?
now?
That second year at that linebacker position. I think he's a budding star, but I want to see him make more splash plays this year. As a second-year player, see growth from him at that linebacker position. Obviously, Myles Garrett is the guy you think about when you think of this Browns defense. But a couple guys that they drafted, Perion Winfrey, a rookie out of Oklahoma, who has high upside. And then I'm not sure who else. He's a guy that I'm looking at. Obviously, you add a guy like did they add Chase Winovich? Let me see. Who did they add on the defensive line this year?
Yes, they did. They traded for him from the Patriots.
Yep. So that's a good move. I think he can make an impact off the edge. They did lose Jadeveon Clowney, or did they?
No, they signed him. Yeah.
They re-signed him, so that's good too. Malik McDowell as well. They lost him. I don't know. I mean, the big storyline is Deshaun Watson, but if it were up to me, it'd be the things that I mentioned. The center position is an interesting one. I mean, J.C. Tretter's been a stalwart for them at that center position. Jedrick Wills is a guy. Some of the guys that they drafted that have been hurt the past couple of years, looking for them to step up. Um, so him at the left tackle position, and then obviously some of the defensive moves. JOK, I guess is what they call him at the linebacker position. See what he does in his second year. And then that interior defensive line with Perion Winfrey and Chase Winovich, a good depth piece off the edge. And you obviously have Clowney back. You'd like to see him stay healthy and make an impact. But yeah, I think the Browns will be fine. A guy like Greg Newsome in the secondary, who's going to the second year out of Northwestern. Denzel Ward, he got a contract extension, so he needs to justify that. They just have a lot of prove-it guys. I think they have a capable backup in Jacoby Brissett, who can win them games, keep them above water until Deshaun Watson comes back if he's suspended. They have a manageable schedule early with games against Carolina, the Jets, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, at home. It gets a little tougher right before their bye week with the Chargers and Baltimore and Cincinnati. But hopefully by after that bye week, they'll have Deshaun Watson back and they can make a little run. This is a very hard division. It's probably going to take 11, 12 wins to win it, especially with this Bengals team that we have coming back. But I don't know. It was an interesting offseason. But of course, their success this year all hinges on Deshaun Watson, whether or not he's going to actually play.
Right. Yeah. For me, it just comes down to how healthy are the Browns in the trenches. That's where this team really hung their hat in that year where they made that run to the divisional round. Obviously, with the offensive line being the stronger of the two, but still the defensive line, held their own, had good role players, and then of course Myles Garrett. So, how healthy are they going to be in the trenches? That's the question I have. And then number two, obviously, the elephant in the room is the Deshaun Watson thing. But to me, it also comes down to, can these running backs stay healthy as well? Can they recreate the form they had in 2020? Last year, it seemed like, one would get hurt and the other would play okay, and then the other would get hurt as soon as the other guy came back. So it was just super unfortunate in that sense. I just think that's one of those things where those two guys just complement each other so well. They're just better when they can both play. And if both those guys are playing, I think they're going to be competitive no matter who's at quarterback. Because I like this defense. They're opportunistic. Obviously, they will give up the big play here and there, but for the most part, I like how aggressive they are. I like that they're willing to send the blitz when they need to, and they definitely don't crack easily. That's for sure. They're a very resilient team, and that's going to be tested this year, 100%. They're going to lean on their defense a lot if Deshaun Watson doesn't play. So, running game and defense, that's what it's going to be for the first however many weeks until Deshaun Watson comes back. If they can just hold their own and, stay 2 games under 500, then that's as good as you can ask for.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing we should not forget to talk about is special teams.
Right.
Punt, kick returner was a big question for them last year. They did sign Jakeem Grant in free agency, and they drafted a guy in the 5th round that they're going to battle it out for those duties. So special teams could also make differences for them in some of
Right.
these games that they're playing without Deshaun Watson. So can't forget about that as well. But look, for the Browns, I think it's going to be probably 6 or 8 games at minimum for Deshaun Watson. Probably one of the two, if I had to guess. I don't think they're going to go a full season. But I don't know when that ruling's going to come down. But if you look at their schedule, and I know we're not here to really project yet what they're going to end up being, but at Carolina, man, that's a game you circle on the calendar right away, going up against what will likely be Baker Mayfield, week 1. And then the Jets, that's a win. I mean, those are 2 winnable games. If you can start off 2-0, you give yourself a little bit of a cushion. Then it starts to heat up a little bit. Pittsburgh, Atlanta's a game they should win. But then the Chargers, New England, Baltimore, Cincinnati. And their schedule is luckily split nicely. They get a bye at about the halfway point. And hopefully they can get Deshaun Watson back on that bye week. It will work out perfectly that way so that he has a week to get acclimated again. And then the schedule kind of heats up after the bye week. At Miami, who's going to be a better football team this year. At Buffalo, Tampa Bay. You throw Houston in there, but at Cincinnati, Baltimore, New Orleans, Washington, and Pittsburgh. That's not an easy second half of the schedule. So the key for the Browns, as you said, is keeping your head above water during those first 6 to 8 weeks. And I think it's possible. They definitely have some winnable games in there.
Right, exactly. I don't really know if there's really much else to say here. The last thing I'll say is I didn't like how the whole Baker Mayfield situation ended, but we can talk about that more once we get to the Panthers and NFC South. I'll leave that for later. But for now, let's move right along to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And since this is your team, I'll just let you start off.
All right. Had to take a sip of water. All right. So, man, I've been watching the Steelers for 15 years, and this was by far the most intriguing, fun, interesting offseason that they've ever had in my lifetime. I guess you could sum it up as a start of a new era, a transition and a start of a new era this year of Steelers football, truly, like in the truest fashion. You got a new stadium deal, which I don't like, but Hines is still in there somewhere, so luckily. So that you have a new general manager. Obviously, Kevin Colbert retired. They have Omar Khan, who's been sort of like that behind the scenes salary cap guru for them, done a really good job. I really like what he's done so far, giving Minka Fitzpatrick his much deserved contract extension. Looking at maybe giving Deontay Johnson the same thing, but we'll see how that. I think they're going to let the season play out and see how he plays. But that's the storyline in Steelers camp. He's done a couple other things as well that I like that I'll talk about here in a minute. So new GM, obviously new quarterback situation with Kenny Pickett, the guy out of Pittsburgh who they drafted with number 20 overall. A guy that I like. We'll see what happens. But he's going to have to earn his spot as he's battling with Mitchell Trubisky, the guy who they signed in the offseason. So that's sort of the quarterback situation that's going to be talked about a lot throughout training camp and throughout the league. And then, new players, younger team. No Ben Roethlisberger, no Juju Smith-Schuster, no Joe Hayden. They did lose some key veterans, the guys that I'm mentioning. Who else? Yeah, Joe Hayden. Joe Schobert was a guy that they traded from Jacksonville at the linebacker position last year. Didn't really work out all that well with Devin Bush. So they later brought in Miles Jack, who I'll talk about here in a minute, to replace him, which I really like. But yeah, Joe Schobert lost him. Lost Joe Hayden. Lost their tackle, Zach Banner, who was hurt a lot. Didn't really play. Was good when he played, but didn't really play. Ray-Ray McCloud was kind of a fourth guy, special teams guy who they lost, but they brought in a guy from New England. that I like to fill his role. Juju went to the Chiefs. Good for him. He's in a good situation. James Washington. A guy who's really talented, went to the Cowboys. I hope he does well there with y'all. But a guy who they didn't really use all that much, and when they used him, they didn't use him right. So I don't know what the situation was there. It just really didn't pan out the way I thought it would, with Roethlisberger sort of on the back end of his career, not really throwing the ball deep as much. And that's what Washington does best. He's a deep threat, go up and get the ball guy. It is what it is. But then you look at what they did. They spent the most money they've ever spent during free agency. The Steelers are typically, throughout their history, they've been a draft and develop team. Mostly build from within, occasionally make a signing trade here and there when they need to, but this was a very active offseason. They filled a lot of the voids. I think they upgraded their interior offensive line. A guy like James Daniels was the Bears' best offensive lineman for the past couple of years. Obvious upgrade at the guard position. Mason Cole's a guy who comes in from Arizona, started at center, veteran guy. Isn't anything great, but he's definitely an upgrade over what they had last year in their rookie Kendrick Green. So I do like what they did at the guard center guard position. They'll have Kevin Dotson back from injury. So I do like the interior part of the offensive line. They gave Chuks Okorafor the right tackle and extension. He's grown in a lot of areas, still growing. The tackle position is still sort of a question. We have Dan Moore on the other side, who was a fourth-round pick out of A&M last year, had his ups and downs. If he can step up at those tackle positions, I think the offensive line will be much improved. But I already think it is. And that interior offensive line, I think, will help the running game. I don't expect it to be anything special, but if it can be middle of the league, middle of the pack, it'll be a big upgrade. And then obviously the big thing you have to talk about is the quarterback position. Look, Kenny Pickett, I don't know when we'll see him. I think we'll probably start out seeing Mitch Trubisky. But look, Trubisky's a guy who's won a division, been to the playoffs, won a playoff game, has experience, looked good when he filled in for Josh Allen last year in Buffalo. I think he learned a lot. Hopefully, as long as he plays smart football and keeps his turnovers down, which is a big question, I think with what he's able to do with his legs, which I think is underrated, it'll very much help what Matt Canada, their newish offensive coordinator, wants to do in this offense that he wasn't really able to do with an aging Ben Roethlisberger. So I think that helps, at least from a mobility standpoint, the things they're able to do offensively. And they have a really young offense. This is one of the younger offenses in the league. They drafted 2 new receivers, notably, who is it? George Pickens, their second-round guy out of Georgia, who looks really good in training camp early. For me, offensively, it's going to be – I know Pat Freiermuth is going to be really good. He's going to be a guy, a sort of safety blanket, main target for Trubisky. I love how they use him. But I think the story here is Claypool. Claypool's got to be better. That's the bottom line. He had a good rookie season last year. Some of the antics on and off the field, didn't love it. Didn't really have that big game. Wasn't real productive for a guy like him last year. I need to see more from Claypool. That and the tackle positions are my big questions offensively, along with the quarterback position. And then we'll talk about the defense. One thing I don't think you can forget is they added they have a new defensive coordinator. They promoted their secondary coach to defensive coordinator. And they added Brian Flores to this defensive coaching staff. Right. So that should help as well. You can't forget that. Very capable head coach on their defensive coaching staff. I love what they did at the linebacker position. Probably my favorite move of the Steelers offseason was getting Miles Jack from the Jaguars, signing him to a cheap 2-year deal to go along with Devin Bush at that middle linebacker position. Hopefully we see more from Devin Bush this year. Struggled last year, but was coming off the ACL injury. Hopefully a full year helps him get back to where he was his rookie season, where he was at least making an impact, making plays. But this pass rush, I don't worry about it. We're getting Tyson Alualu back. We lost Stephon Tuitt to retirement, but we still have Cameron Hayward and some other guys. And then TJ Watt, of course, Alex Highsmith. And then the secondary. I like what we did at the cornerback position, getting Levi Wallace, who was the second guy in Buffalo last year, made some plays. I like that. And then re-signing Akella Witherspoon, who came on at the end of last year, along with Cam Sutton. So I like the secondary, headed by Minkah Fitzpatrick, who got his contract extension. I love the defense. It should be really good again. Top 5, top 6 in the league if everyone stays healthy. We'll see what TJ Watt does for an encore after having 22 sacks last year and winning the Defensive Player of the Year. There are high expectations there. But the questions mainly for Pittsburgh is, number 1, quarterback play. What does that look like? Number 2, it is a young core of weapons. So do they stay healthy? And what does Claypool do? He needs to step up. I do think Pickens is a guy that you're going to see really take a big role right away in this offense, based on what I've been hearing the first couple of days of training camp, but also just based on what they have here. When Pittsburgh drafts receivers, they do it for a reason. They wanted to make an impact right away. So I think you're going to see Pickens make an impact along with Johnson. If he wants that contract extension, you got to catch the football. And that's been his bugaboo, those drops. But otherwise, I don't worry too much about him. And then the offensive line. Let's see what it looks like. Can it take a step up? If that happens, the quarterbacks play smart, free, turnover-free football for the most part. I don't expect it to be perfect, of course, but if that happens, I mean, it's Mike Tomlin coach team, and they added talent in the offseason. They'll be right around where they were last year. It is a tough schedule. Let me look, and I'll stop talking. Yeah, they don't start off easy. At Cincinnati, New England, and at Cleveland, the Jets, Buffalo, Tampa Bay, Miami. It's a tough schedule. With a new quarterback, it could be rough, but it's a Mike Tomlin coach team. You got a great defense, hopefully an improved offensive line, and improved running game. You won 9 games last year with Roethlisberger, who, let's be honest, wasn't Roethlisberger,
Right.
if we're being honest. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be right around where we were last year, 9-10 wins. Solid football team. Probably can't win the Super Bowl, but probably couldn't anyways with how strong the AFC is. So,
Right. Yeah.
go ahead.
It's interesting because, we obviously saw 2 of the teams in the division with high expectations kind of implode on themselves last year. And then the Steelers were just kind of hanging around, I mean, I don't know if you disagree with this, but they weren't doing anything spectacular last year, to be honest. I mean, they just weren't beating themselves. They were playing smart. They did what they had to do. They were winning close games. And that's the biggest thing to me this year is can they steal some of those close games that they were able to last year? We talked about this during the segment we had for Ben's retirement. Last year, he wasn't Ben, but in the fourth quarter, it felt like he kind of rekindled something. You he was able to lead the team to a field goal or whatever the case may be, and kind of steady the ship. So without that veteran presence there, it'll be interesting to see if they can still steal some of those, tight games. Um, that's the question for me. Is the quarterback play going to be a hindrance? Um, if I were to make a prediction on that question, I'd say the answer would be yes and no. Because I just think Mitch is a guy who has great weeks and has bad weeks. I know there's going to be some stinkers, and there's also going to be some really good moments. So as long as things even out, um, I think you're going to be right about what you said, like 9 or 10 wins. Whether that's enough to make the playoffs in the AFC this year, who knows? But 9, 10 wins is still extremely impressive given all the turnover y'all have had. So
Yeah, it's just this, whereas we sort of expected, but even to a bigger extent with some of the moves that were made in the front office, on the coaching staff, and off the field. But yeah, I don't know. I just, until proven otherwise, with the Mike Tomlin coach team, and I know it hasn't been all that great in the postseason. Some of the postseason disappointments the past couple of years, but in the regular season, until he doesn't have, or he has a losing season, I'm going to put faith in him that his leadership ability and whatever else. I mean, the guy won 8 games with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. So,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I think it'll be 8, 9, 10 wins. Who knows? I think what you brought up a great point. A lot of these close games. I mean, last year, week 1 in Buffalo, that was, of course, an upset. They won that game by a touchdown. But then some of the wins that they had towards the middle, end of the season, I mean, they squeaked out a game against Seattle at home in overtime. They squeaked out a road game against Cleveland, 15-10. Squeaked out a game against Chicago at home. Tied the Lions. I mean, that was disappointing. Probably cost them a playoff seed, so they didn't have to face Kansas City. You know, um, you know, barely beat Baltimore at home. That 2-point conversion was really the deciding play there. Beat Tennessee by barely a touchdown.
right.
Beat, so yeah, you do bring up a good point. That last game at Baltimore, they squeezed that one out in overtime to make the playoffs. So yeah, but I think with this defense, some of these weeks you're not going to have to score all that much, and that's why you have faith in what they have at the quarterback position.
Right.
That some of these weeks the defense will make the plays. You'll get some short fields, and this running game will hopefully be improved, so the onus doesn't obviously all fall on whoever it is at the quarterback position, whether it's Trubisky or Pickett. But we'll see. We'll see. See what happens.
Yeah, we shall see. I think it's fair to have faith in a winning season for Tomlin. I mean, it's what 13 years running, 14 years running, something like that.
15 years. Yep.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, not all winning seasons. They had a couple 500s in there, but
Right.
no
But
losing
he hasn't had losing seasons.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, we will get on to the last team here in the AFC North, and that is, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals, or rather, the Cincinnati Burr. That wasn't funny. Sorry. But last year, I'm sure y'all all remember. Y'all don't need a recap, but I'm going to do it anyway. They made their run to the Super Bowl. I'm not going to say I predicted it, but in the weirdest way possible, I did pick them to win in a couple of those playoff games. So, I'll take some credit. Uh, but anyway, the team really came together at the right time. Joe Burrow got hot, and that was that. They made the key plays when they needed them, and they were really close to winning the Super Bowl. If you recall, I mean that last fourth down, if Joe Burrow had that little bit more time, Jamar Chase was open down that right side. But that's neither here nor there. We're not here to talk about that. That's off season. The key thing here is they threw all their cards at the offensive line. They threw all their cards and some at the offensive line, which is exactly what they needed to do. I love the Lyle Collins signing. Um, it's tough to see him go as a Cowboys fan, but I think he's a really good fit in the way they like to run the football. He's really a mauler in the run game. He's a little bit inconsistent in the passing game, a little bit too much penalties at times, but I think it's 100% an upgrade. Um, they also upgraded the interior of the offensive line. Um, they have their second-year tackle. What's his name? Oh my goodness, I have it here. Hold on, I'm so sorry. Um,
Jonah
Jackson
Williams.
Carman. Jackson Carman.
Okay.
Their second year tackle coming back, Jackson Tarman. They're hoping he can take another step as well. So it's a combination of building from within and also bringing guys in from the outside, which I think is a good combination. And another key addition, this time for the defensive side, they drafted Daxton Hill out of Michigan. Um, I'm not going to say as a Jesse Bates replacement, but Jesse Bates was franchise tagged, so I think they had the future in mind with that pick, and I think they really had a smart offseason. They spent their money in the right spots. They were very strategic. They didn't really make waves, but they didn't really need to. They just wanted to bring some guys back and add depth, which is exactly what they did. And overall, I think it's really solid.
Yeah, I agree. I'll sum it up this way for the Bengals. Three things I'm really looking for. Number one, that offensive line, of course. Wasn't great last year, but it was good enough. The escapability of Burrow saved them a lot of times, but that's why you have him. But I do think they made upgrades here, especially on the interior offensive line. A guy like Alex Kappa, who started 46 games the past 3 years with Tampa Bay. He provides stability at the right guard position. Of course, you have Jackson Carman coming back. Struggled last year. He'll stabilize that position. Lyle Collins, a very solid pickup in free agency. Only allowed 2 sacks last year with the Cowboys. Ted Karras is a guy who comes from New England, solid veteran guy, who is penciled in as their new starting center to replace Trey Hopkins. Solid upgrade there. And then Jonah Williams, the other tackle, who, played team high in snaps last year. 96% of their offensive snaps after injuries slowed him for the first couple of years of his career out of Alabama. So, offensive line, you got some veteran depth on that offensive line. Guys that will slot in right away and hopefully improve the interior, solidify the interior of this offensive line and the offensive line overall. That's number one. If that improves, well, this offense is going to be good, really good, because of their weapons. Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. They lost C.J. Uzama, but they did add Hayden Hurst, who's a totally capable tight end and an efficient receiver to replace him. Had a 500-yard season last year. We'll probably have more with Cincinnati, given all the weapons they have in this offense. And then their running back, Joe Mixon, along with guys like P. Rhines and Chris Evans at the depth position. I really like it. I really like it offensively. So the offensive line is primarily number one. I think they improved there. They got better. Don't know how much better, but they definitely got better. Secondly, this pass rush was very, very good last year. It was like one of the top in the league,
Right.
surprisingly. Something I did not predict going into last season. But guys like Trey Hendrickson had a great year, earned his first Pro Bowl selection last year, was the leader of this pass rush. B.J. Hill, he notched about 6 sacks before, Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader. They did lose Larry Ogunjobi, who went to the Steelers. I forgot to mention that earlier, who they added as a depth piece. But can they repeat that success? We saw it last year. Do these guys stay healthy, and can they repeat that? I think they can, but who knows? Last year was sort of unexpected in a way, the success that they were able to have rushing the passer. So as long as they can repeat that, I think it'll be good. And then the secondary, obviously. Jesse Bates is a guy they franchise tagged. Still need to find a way to get an extension done with him. But, he had 2 interceptions in the postseason, so I don't see any problem there. Getting his extension, played big for them, has for basically the past couple of years. Dax Hill, I'm interested to see how he fits in their draft pick out of Michigan. He provides a good blend of speed, explosiveness, and coverage skills. I think he'll make an impact right away. And then what does this cornerback situation look like? Eli Apple got criticized a lot last year, but did some good things as well. And then you obviously have Chidobe Awuzie, who was a headliner in last year's free agent class. And then Von Bell, of course, at the safety position as well. So how does this all shape out in the secondary? Is another thing that I'm watching. But I think the pass rush will be good again. I think the offensive line is upgraded. Weapons are great. Tops in the league, if you ask me. Burrow will be – I don't foresee any problems. He'll be great once again. And as long as the secondary gels and this pass rush can replicate the success they had last year, this team will probably win the division.
All right. Yeah. For me, it's the exact same questions, and it's also there has to be an element of luck as well. There's so many times where you see the loser of the Super Bowl the year before come back the next season, and it feels like it's becoming rarer and rarer to see them, bounce back and go deep in the playoffs again because it's so hard to do it twice. That's the biggest thing we always see. You think about the last, 5 to 10 Super Bowl runner-ups. They've all, either, made the playoffs and had a disappointing short ending, or they completely missed the playoffs. It's never, got back to the Super Bowl unless, it's Tom Brady. That's different. That's different. But as I said, there has to be an element of luck to this, and they have to, not take that Super Bowl run they had last year as, we're just going to do it again. Like, they have to come ready this season. And, I think that's the beauty of having a guy like Joe Burrow, because I think he's the perfect type of guy to have his team not get complacent, because he's the exact opposite. He's a very, blue collar, fight for everything, underdog story type of guy. And I think they're going to shock some people. I think at their ceiling, I'm not going to make any predictions, but I think the ceiling for this team could be in the 14 win range. I know that sounds super high, but they got better in a lot of areas and they added more depth. And I just think the defense is solid and the offense has a chance to be at an all-time level.
Last thing I'll say, and I agree with everything you said, but their schedule, just a quick look at their schedule, not making any predictions once again, just looking at their schedule, how it shapes out. winnable games early, gauntlet, and I mean gauntlet late. It's sort of similar to the Browns in a way in which their schedule's pretty much split right in half. They have 9 games before the bye, 8 games after the bye. So that's a good break there. But a lot of winnable games early, games that they can win for sure. Pittsburgh, Dallas won't be easy, but that's a game they can win. The Jets, don't worry about that. Miami, I mean, these are games you can win. New Orleans, Atlanta, Cleveland, probably without Deshaun Watson, Carolina. I mean, that's a winnable schedule early. But then you go after the bye, Pittsburgh on the road, never easy. At Tennessee, number 1 seed in the AFC last year. Kansas City, Cleveland, probably with Deshaun Watson. At Tampa Bay, at New England, Buffalo, Baltimore. I mean, that's a gauntlet to end the season. So I think that's where that storyline gets bigger, and that if they have this sort of September, October Super Bowl hangover and they don't come out as they should, well, then you're putting yourself in a more precarious position. If you don't win a lot of those, if you lose some of those winnable games early, that schedule on the back end isn't going to get any easier. It gets a lot harder. So you want to have a strong start. That's all I'll say for the Bengals. But we'll get more into that later.
Yeah, and another question is, can Zach Taylor innovate? Can he, come up with new, exciting plays to where they can, kind of lean on in tough situations? I don't want to say it will fall on him if it doesn't go right this year, but it will. I don't want to say it, but that's just the truth, man. If it doesn't go the way they want it to this year, all the fingers will be pointed at Zach Taylor. So
Right.
I'm going to be having my eye on him to see how he comes out with his game plans early in the season. Because as you said, it's going to be extremely important for him to have a good feel for what his team is best at. And, it's not as easy to do as most think, especially since this is going to be a different team, and they're going to have more options. They're going to be able to throw deep more often. So can he figure this puzzle pieces out?
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I think this was a good format that we should continue moving forward with our division by division recaps of the offseason and previews of the season. I wasn't sure of our plan. If you don't have anything else to say, are we gonna just start another episode and end this with just the divisions, just this division as an episode itself right here, or are we gonna talk about the MLB trade? Okay, yeah. So we'll end it right here. This is our AFC North offseason recap and season preview. We'll continue with these throughout the next couple of weeks. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And we're going to try to get a second episode here and right now. So
stay tuned for that.
Is that all you have to say?
Yeah, that's it, man. Sign us off.
All right. Well, I guess just like the stadium name, Heinz Field, we are gone.
Peace.
Peace.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to click on one of these 2 videos right here, our latest video right here on the left, or the video YouTube recommends for you on the right.